Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Tim Larkin is a former military intelligence officer who was part of a beta group that redesigned how special operations personnel trained for close combat. He has a 25-year career of training people in 52 countries in how to deal with imminent violence. He developed target-focused training, a system designed to quickly stop any attacker by inflicting crippling pain using simple, intuitive movements anyone can do. During the last 20 years, he's trained not only elite military special forces and law enforcement units, but corporate and civilian clientele in New York, Las Vegas, London, and other cities around the world. I learned a lot from his book, When Violence is the Answer, learning how to do what it takes when your life is at stake, and enjoyed talking to him about it in this episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, my favor as usual is to please continue to share this with others, and it would mean so much if you would rate it and leave me some feedback. If you would like to keep this podcast going, you can become a patron of the show and visit my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to make a donation. I'd like to thank my newest patron, Dr. Mark Cheng, for his support and for the introduction to today's guest. For comments or suggestions, email me at sifumimichan@gmail.com or reach out on social media at sifumimichan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. I'm super excited to talk to you about target focus training and your books and everything. And this is actually like just perfect timing because, of course, shout out to Dr. Mark Cheng, who kind of introed us, but we were talking on our podcast and self-defense or awareness, something came up and I'm like, have you read When Violence is the Answer? And he's like, is that Tim Larkin's book? And I'm like, yes. And then all the dots connected. So we were really excited.
Mark's incredible. He's been such a great guy over the years. And it's funny, he came out when he was doing work as a roving editor for Black Belt. He came out to one of my seminars.
Yes.
And he was just super complimentary, and we've remained friends ever since. I knew Mark when he had short hair.
Yeah. Yes. Apparently, I had met Mark when he had short hair because we weren't in the same martial arts circle, kind of. Right. But we really just connected this year, and it's just been like I've already had him on the show twice, and just such a great resource for movement in general. But it was so great that there was that connectivity because, of course, I had read your book when it first came out, and I loved telling people I was reading a book called When Violence is the Answer because they know me and they kind of laughed, and I'm like, no. Let me explain. But I figured you could probably explain to people because, of course, the title is very attention grabbing, but I think it's highly misunderstood, of course. So perhaps you can kind of share why you designed this program and what it really means for our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I named the book. I had to fight to get that name, and obviously, it wasn't the best from a marketing standpoint, from a book marketing standpoint, because of what you say. People, oh my God, violence. When it would ever be the answer? But the reason I used the term violence and I didn't use fight, or I didn't use some of the other terms that are out there, or self-defense or anything, is because truly what you do that ends up protecting yourself, or which gets determined to be self-defense, is violence, and it's a tool. And how you use a tool determines whether it was a justified use of the tool or it's a criminal use of the tool. And there's a lot of information on the criminal side, but there's very little information on the justified side. And that's really, to me, that's the most interesting answer, because violence cuts across all demographics. It doesn't care what your gender is. It doesn't care what your sexual preference is. Doesn't care what what culture you're from. Doesn't care if you're rich, poor. Nobody gets a pass. And so it's a universal human tool that we all have available to us, but there's very good information on how we would ever use that tool and when would it ever be justified to use that tool. Because most people can't even imagine that there would ever be a time where using violence in the way they think about it would ever be useful.
Right.
So that was my main reason for writing the book, was to basically tell people, like, listen, the tool itself is not the issue. How the tool is used, and unfortunately, most of the times we hear about the tool being used criminally, and therefore we think, oh, there's no good information over here. and we dismiss it, and we actually are putting ourselves behind the power curve when we do that.
Yeah.
So
one of the things I would love for you to dialogue with me about, because it was such a revelatory thing, the way you explained it in particular. Of course, being a lifelong martial artist, I have a lot of different philosophies and things like that. But this book really resonated with me on so many levels, because I feel like it really, fills kind of that bridge and that gap of what you just kind of explained. But one of the biggest takeaways is your explanation of social aggression versus asocial violence. And like you said, really getting people to understand, when you think of violence, you think something, right? It's like the first thing that pops into your head is usually not what it actually is. And so I would just love to kind of dialogue with you a little bit more about that.
I think the best way probably to put it is most people want to respond to violence, or want to respond with violence in a situation where they don't need to. And then they want to talk, or they want to dialogue in a situation where violence is the only situation. And what do I mean by that? Some people are so hair triggered that if somebody takes their parking space or something like that, that's it, road rage incident. They're very quick to react to something like that. Whereas if it's the middle of the night and their door gets kicked in and there's 4 guys with, all in balaclavas and they're all armed, and they're coming in, what do we do? Well, who are you? What do you want? Why are you, we're going to talk to them now at that point. And clearly a situation like that is one that probably, if you can't get yourself out of there, you're going to have to respond with violence. It's a very determined, situation that way. So that's my education. Like, most people make the mistake of letting their ego get them into something that is purely by choice. The most recent example I gave on my, I have a YouTube channel and I do things, but the most recent one was really sad. Was a hockey coach, a girls hockey coach in Minnesota. And by all accounts, this guy was an amazing guy, just a great guy. He goes out to a bar one night and, during the COVID protocols, and apparently the urinals in the men's bathroom, there were socially distanced. So they would be taped up with plastic and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Well, some guy came in, he was obviously, drunk, and he was obviously very irate. He did not appreciate the COVID protocols, rips the plastic off, uses the urinal, being very basic about it. Coach doesn't say anything to him. He's there at that point, but he was annoyed. The coach was really annoyed by this guy's behavior. So sure enough, as they're leaving, as the coach is leaving, he walks by the guy, words are exchanged. And then the guy comes out, follows him outside. They get into it. They go back and forth. The guy that was kind of drunk and aggressive ends up pushing the coach. The coach ends up going down a flight of stairs and is killed. Wow. And I look at it and people are like, oh my God, this coach is never aggressive. I can't even imagine him saying, a harsh word to anybody. Yeah. But he allowed, it's not his fault. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is what I hear this versions of this story all the time, where something completely avoidable, meaning there's no reason. Listen, the guy was irate. It's not his job. If security was there or something, or the owner of the establishment, if the guy was really that bad, they can take care of it. There was no threat to him at that point, other than the guy was annoying.
Right.
And he did a good job right up until he left. And as he was leaving, that's when he has the exchange. And then we don't understand these unintended consequences. And the idea is, once you put your hands on somebody, you have no idea how it's going to come out. Whatever your intentions were, I'm sure this guy had no intention of going out and murdering a coach. It wasn't, I think it was determined manslaughter. But this coach had no idea that, he was going to lose his life over this. And in the book, I talk about the 3-day rule, and 3-day rule for me is basically whatever incident we're talking about right now, it's really got you enraged and thinking you have to respond. 3 days from now, is it going to matter to you? Meaning 3 days from now, if you're sitting in a jail cell, or God forbid, you're 6 feet under, will you still tell yourself in those situations, yeah, there's nothing else I could do. I had to respond the way I did. And very few things meet that threshold. And so, having that mindset is extremely important. And you have to do that work ahead of time. Meaning we have to think about this stuff ahead of time, because you don't want to make it in the spur of the moment, because spur of the moment, your emotions are going to get away with you. And I am not immune to any of this. There are times where I will get triggered, but because I've done this, I'm able to walk myself back if it is not a imminent threat. So antisocial aggression versus asocial violence. What are we talking about? Antisocial aggression is usually unpleasant. It's usually most of the things like we're talking about road rage incidents, people just being obnoxious, having arguments that could escalate into violence. It definitely could escalate into violence, but it hasn't got there yet. And you have the ability to get yourself out. You can disengage, from that in some way, shape, or form, or you can just exit, Asocial violence is, to me, the more interesting aspect of it, because asocial violence is it's like the black swan event, but it is imminent, grievous bodily harm is coming at you. Meaning, if you had an escape, you would have taken it. If you could have talked your way out of it, you would have. All of that is gone now. And the person who is about to engage you is not even engaging you like a human. They're looking at you as just some sort of a target or opportunity. And in that situation, if you don't recognize it being asocial, and what I mean is a predator who is in an asocial mode loves it when you try to use your social during those times. As you're talking, you're trying to talk to them. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, stop, while they're stabbing you. You have to recognize those situations. And what's good about asocial is if you train correctly, I think the greatest gift I've ever given clients is when they tell me, hey, I recognized it was getting asocial here and I was able to get out. Had I waited, it would have gone horribly wrong later. But they understand the idea, the lack of communication. When I train people at a seminar or anything, there's no social on mats. Like there's none of the great things that I grew up with combat sports and martial arts. We're helping each other up. We're playing really good music. We're doing all that. I don't do that. I create a completely asocial environment when we're in there. It's not a brutal environment. It's just, there's no helping hand to help pull you back up after the last technique or anything like that. We are training for violence. We are training for going up against a violent predator who just is not going to give you any of those social niceties. And what's interesting is just training in an asocial environment makes you much more attuned to asocial. And it's one of these strange things. It's not, we can talk about it the way we are, but when you experience it, when you kinesthetically experience it in a training mode, that's what sticks with you. And that's the interesting part in that. And that's where people make the most, the biggest problems. There's prison video that I use, and there's an interview that's done by one guy during the prison, and he murdered another inmate. It was done on HBO. It was called Gladiator Days, and it was interesting when they interviewed him. He was talking about just the idea of living in an asocial environment like prison, and he goes, yeah, I've seen guys not know that something's about to be real, and they don't understand. And then they get themselves knocked off, and then use an expletive, they get themselves effed up. And he goes, that won't be me. He goes, because I know, I see what's about to go down. That's just gone asocial, and this guy doesn't know. And so the reason I look to uncomfortable places like, federal penitentiaries, I study prison gangs. I've actually interviewed, ex-leaders from these gangs. It's the way they use violence. They use violence in such a clean manner, meaning violence for them is currency. Yeah. And when you have that dispassionate look at the subject, you can actually learn a hell of a lot that's useful to us. Because what we do is we get very emotional about it. We get very emotional about the story behind the violence, and most of the useful video that I have on teaching people about violence, unfortunately, it's criminal use of the tool. Right. And so getting people to understand that it's okay to look at stuff like that to learn, and it doesn't make you one of them. Studying violence does not make you violent. And that's probably one of the bigger messages that you put out, because that's what's being used against us as citizens right now. Meaning we're told that, we need to learn self-defense, quote unquote. We need to learn, the counter to violence and stuff like that. And that puts you two steps behind if you think like that. What you want to do is you want to be on par with the worst of the worst as far as you look at the tool and using the tool. I'm not worried about my clients being justified in using the tool, because those are the type of people that seek out training. The criminals don't seek out training. They already know that. That's people say, "Oh, aren't you worried it'll get into the wrong, to the wrong people?" I go, "No, the wrong people already have this information."
Right. Okay.
They don't talk about it our way.
Yes.
But they have it. Yeah.
All right. There's a lot to unpack there. So, rewinding a bit, like one is for where people are not using it in a social way, and they're like, that's like the typical scenario where you really, I think what you said was checking the ego is the main thing. I know you gave some great examples even of your own experiences where people were yelling at you in the car. And I think about people I know that have definitely fallen victim and have been very lucky to not end up in jail or worse, right? Like when we talk to a lot of, we mentor a lot of youth and thing, we're always like, what's the worst case scenario, right? Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And is it worth it? So I love your 3-day concept there, because I think that's the first thing, is recognizing that they're two separate situations. Like, do I need to engage in a fight because I'm irritated or even if you're right? Like you said, like the hockey coach wasn't necessarily quote unquote wrong in like that guy was misbehaving, but it's not about right or wrong. It's more, what's the worst thing that could happen? There was a video where you said a lady was stopping somebody because they cut the line. I can't remember what the scenario was, but then she ended up dead because the guy like lashed out, and neither of their days wanted to probably start that way. And it's ruined 2 lives, right? And more than 2 lives. It's all the family and friends. So I love that kind of breakout. And then the second thing to the piece to that is kind of the consequence issue of really, really taking that step back to think about the consequence, because I think you really highlight very, very well how it's just not worth it, right? Like the consequence of getting into like social aggression versus understanding that this is not life or death, right? I think that's really important. And now with the criminals, what I really liked was how you highlighted that they use that education. Like what I found was education is super important. And this is what we're talking about, like learning from your book, and how you explain what criminals do with that information and then what we can do with that information. So it's like you said, we're trying to level the playing field. So maybe you can expand on that part, since we were kind of segueing into it.
Yeah, well, what was interesting was there's a couple of interviews that were done with leaders of some of the larger Persian gangs. Aryan Brotherhood was one of them, and then the other was was Mexican Mafia. And the two leaders, when they were interviewed separately, one was a law enforcement interview, the other one was for National Geographic, and they go through the lines. And what's interesting is the education that it takes to become a shot caller. The books that they are encouraged to read, things like 48 Laws of Power, Machiavelli's The Prince. They both studied anatomy, and they both studied psychology. Human nature was very important to them. Now, they use it obviously because it gives them control, gives them power. What was interesting was all the books that were recommended were very similar to a special operations course that I took at JFK for young officers in North Carolina at the center when I was a young Spec Ops Intel officer. And we had the same list of books for the most part, except for one thing, and that was anatomy. We didn't study anatomy. Human anatomy, when it comes to your self-protection, is probably one of the things that you really want to understand, because it's funny. I was talking with another guy yesterday, and a very, very well-known guy in the industry. And he was funny. We were talking about the proliferation of the UFC and everything, and which is amazing. I'm here in Vegas, so I have a lot of friends that are in it, and I love it. But we were talking about the idea of, hey, how do you get across to people the difference between, self-defense, outside of the ring and outside of competition and everything. And he goes, okay, Tim, he goes, you're watching the UFC. He goes, okay, let's put them in street clothes. Mm-hmm. Now we're going to take them in the bar. What would we call that if we saw that? And I said, well, basically it came to, and I go, you call it a fight. He goes, that's right. He goes, and guess what? There is no fighting in self-defense. He goes, you can't fight, meaning you can't be a willing participant. when you get out there, meaning two guys that get into a bar fight that agree to get in a bar fight, that is not self-defense. That actually, they're both criminally liable at that point. And we have to, as citizens, we have to understand that critical difference that, we are not there to fight at all. As a matter of fact, you better have, if it's video, there better be video of you saying, hey, trying to back away, trying to do everything, to prove that you were forced to act at that point. And I think that's a jarring thing for people when they don't understand that. They have fantasies oftentimes that, oh, well, I'm just going to, I can just get into the fight right away. And they're imagining just a one-on-one type of a duel. They're not imagining all the other things that come into it when the real world's involved, meaning there could be people lurking in the background. There could be multiple attackers. There's going to be weapons, tools, things like that. There's going to be ramifications, even if you're successful, there could be ramifications, meaning not just with the law, but okay, who is this guy that you just do that? And who are his friends and who are his family? And did you, are there going to be ramifications now that you've done this? Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of things when you're looking at violence. The other thing that we're looking at is if you don't look at the tool antiseptically, just cleanly and know where to get your results, like females, when I train females, a guy like me, I'm 6'1", I'm 245 pounds. I've been doing this forever. I look the part, right? I'm going to tell her, hey, honey, this is what you do. Just do this really cool hip throw or something. I have to understand right away one thing. Anything that I'm about to show her, I better be able to do against somebody who is 3 times my size, 3 times my strength, and it better work on them because that's what she faces every day. That's what women face when they're facing real violence and stuff. And you have to understand that. And therefore, you quickly come to the conclusion that injury to the human body is really the only thing that you'd focus on if your life is on the line. And that's male or female. I train males and females the exact same way because the assumptions I make is that, number one, you're going to be facing multiple attackers. Those attackers are going to be bigger, faster, and stronger. And those attackers are going to be carrying weapons. And that's just a normal assumption we should make when we're talking about our everyday life being out there. And that's where we have to be very, very careful with how we look at the tool and how we train for it. And we really have to understand. And I don't mean to think you don't have to become a lawyer and you don't have to really understand self-defense law. You just have to understand that, letting your ego get pulled into something where you can now be looking as a willing participant because of your actions, meaning you responded to the road rage with another attack, and somebody said, "Oh no, I saw her swerve towards him, or I saw her flip him off, or I saw her, flash her lights and do that," and then all of a sudden you're not the victim. You're seen as a willing participant on both sides. At certain times, it's these are things you have to understand, and that's why putting the book out, I try to put really clear definitions. The only time I would ever use violence is if I am completely and totally devoid of choice. And if you have to ask yourself, is now the time? It's not.
Exactly.
And that's just it. So it's exactly. A very clean way to look at things. And it also really, it causes the great thing about understanding the difference between antisocial aggression and asocial violence is the behavioral changes that go through people, especially if I take them through, say, a weekend seminar where I introduce them into concepts. And then I also, they're physically working on the mats on this, and they're understanding how to literally shut down the human body. I don't pull any issues. I show the most, effective manners to, put somebody out. The idea is I want that person non-functional. Non-functional means they're unconscious. They're injured in such a manner that they're no longer a threat or they're dead. Yeah. Those are the stakes that we're talking about. And I have to be okay that every time I go to put my hands on somebody, it may end up like that hockey coach situation. No matter what I'm trying to do, I may think, well, I'll strike him to the solar plexus, take his air, no big deal. Well, I strike him to the solar plexus and the guy looks amazing, probably looks like, the Rock in his prime. And yet all of a sudden he's clutching his heart. He's turning blue because I don't know that he has genetically bad heart. And I just triggered an arrhythmia. Yeah. And now the guy's dying, over what I thought was a safe, strike. We just have to understand crossing into the physical plane has huge ramifications. And therefore you got to have yourself really clear definitions. When would you ever do that? And that's where it really helps. And what's interesting is like there's other things that are going on right now. The Asian community right now is having all this random violence. It's there. And it's an interesting phenomena, because it's not a phenomena. It's actually not just Asian, but random violence like this against an identifiable group. The reason we learn this, studying the prison gangs. Oftentimes, everybody thinks it's racism that is the main determinant why we break off into groups, and it's not that. It's like goes to like right away. And so if you bring up like my buddies at MCRD, they bring in a new recruit to class. All the sergeants, bring them in. He said it's amazing. We leave them all in a group. They all identify by race. They all go into racial groups immediately. That's what happens. And of course, it's the Marines' job to make them all Marines and work with each other right away. Mm-hmm. But it's a human nature thing for us to do that. And then what you'll see these extremes where, random people for some reason are being attacked, because what I try to tell people all the time is individuals can love and care about people. Groups can hate. And when you understand it, the reason I'm saying this is, what happens is when we saw what happened in the last year with a lot of the protests and the riots and the violence that we saw, and then what we're seeing now is a lot of people were really focused, from my perspective, on being upset that they thought the world should be a certain way. Meaning they thought I should be able to go out and protest and do this and have no ramifications, meaning nobody should attack me or do anything like that. I've had people do that. And that's very noble. I'm not saying you can't do that, but when you have to look at the realities of violence, you're willingly putting yourself in a situation where groupthink can happen. And if you do that, then, it's the equivocation of, if I have female clients and they say, well, I should be able to run at 10:30 at night with my earbuds in, right down the street and not get molested, not get attacked or anything. I go, absolutely, you should. You should absolutely be able to do that. I go, unfortunately, though, it also profiles you as an easier potential victim for a predator. Mm-hmm. So you're willingly putting yourself in there. So
right.
When you understand violence, you will understand that things like this can happen. And therefore, you're more careful, when you come out there. You're not going to just take the walk down the street as the normal walk down the street. This is not justifying any of the violence. What I try to do with people is just understand that this is human nature. This is what happens, especially when groups get riled up. And therefore, if that's the case, unfortunately in our country, we have a history of doing terrible things, to the Asian community, that came in. I mean, we interned them during World War II, which is unthinkable. Right. And you have that. And a lot of my Asian friends are, when we have these discussions, that it doesn't understand. I mean, the community as a whole, my wife is a deputy chief out here. And so one of the things she does with all the community policing, she has everybody on there. And we have a very strong Asian community out here. And what's amazing is how all of a sudden people that are just productive members of society, having a great time, raising their families, all of a sudden, now they're worried about, oh my God, am I a target? Is my kid a target? Is my daughter a target?
Yeah.
Things like that, and that's a very real visceral thing. Mm-hmm. And my response to that is not to hide, not to, listen, there's no justification for it, but let's be real. I'm going to do everything I can to protect my kids and my family from that, to include not participating in certain things that I normally would participate in, just because of the potentiality for violence. It makes no sense what's going on right now, but that's where understanding the tool, when you understand it, you can be more objective about it. You can still be enraged and you can still be really, it's absolutely unfair. It makes no sense. But if you understand how humans are and the potentiality for groups to just do this groupthink, my goal is, if you're a client of mine, you read my book, my goal is to give you the best information to protect yourself. It's not going to be the most convenient information, but we have to make those things. There are things that I don't do anymore that I used to enjoy. I used to enjoy going to, certain clubs and bars and stuff like that, but the potentiality just isn't worth it to me. Mm-hmm. Behavior modification.
Right. And so there's a few things there. Because and you're giving so much good information, but obviously I'm obviously very aware of being Asian American and being pretty much an activist in my community regarding like all of the issues that's happening. And, I'm in agreement with you in that we need to be more aware of what that is. And the frustration, I think, then lies where we're just seeing specifically like elderly people being attacked. And it's so hard to be like, hey, get some training, or hey, obviously, obviously. And I know that's not what you mean. I know that you're saying like, we need to be able to identify. And I honestly, like, even watching some of your videos, you're like, you're going to get uncomfortable. And that's how I feel watching a lot of these videos. I don't watch a lot of the, any of the violence videos that come out on social media. But one of the things during this time of, like political, social, tension, everybody is very tense. And one of the things I did actually as a member of the AAPI community was I partnered with law enforcement here because I feel like I have a good rapport with the sheriff. He expressed that he wants to definitely hear our concerns and figure out what we can do. And so we did like a partnership of like safety information, like what you just said, like, well, unfortunately, you should be able to go walking around at 10 o'clock at night with your earbud, but that's just not the way it is. You have to have self-awareness, and you have to be able to know like where you should park your car, where it's bright, where and it's, yes, we shouldn't have to live that way, but it's also reality. And so one of the things I was hoping you could share, and I know you had a comment, but one of the things I wanted you to share is, because that was something that I did, and I wish I had reached out to you a little earlier, but I partnered with them, and there were, there's, as you know, like law lines of them being allowed to give civilians certain training. And so I did like kind of a, if you're being verbally harassed type of thing, like let's step away so that we don't get into the antisocial aggression part. Like, so I kind of did like I don't want to use the word de-escalation because I am in no means an expert or anything like that, but ways to go, let's like try to always avoid, or if there's an elderly person, how can you intervene? Maybe you have better advice than even the little structure I put in. But the law enforcement side did very general, like safety tips and what they're going to look for. Obviously, call 911 is their number one thing. But and then on my side, like we partnered and did a webinar together on ways that just regular citizens can feel a little bit empowered. And as a martial artist, people always are like, hey, self-defense. I'm like, look. Like, unless you're like training for years and you're some sort of like, I try to be real with them that like, this is like for health. This is for there's a lot of benefit, but I really liked your messaging. And if your life is at stake, then it's not about like, it's about literally like hurting the other person so that you can survive the situation, basically, is kind of, I'm probably not as eloquent. But so maybe you could even share like that piece of it, which is how to avoid those antisocial aggression times, because I feel like more people are, subject to that or are witnessing that, somebody like heckling or saying, and it does get racial because, there are racial slurs being used, and that's when we define it as a hate crime. But, that's the type of stuff that I was hoping to kind of help the citizens with here with this webinar that I did with the law enforcement. And I was super curious as to like the advice that you give, even maybe your friends who are Asian, and saying, hey, what if someone starts saying stuff to me in public? What should I do? I mean,
just the overall thing that it's really disturbing for me is, listen, I'm not taking away from other communities and stuff, but I don't know why it seems like they give people a free pass on Asians for some reason. Like Asian community has to put up with a lot of just things that are absolutely irrational, for this, that no other community would allow to happen, and the media would be much more up in arms if the same things that are happening on a far more regular basis to the Asian community were happening to other groups that were there. I think that the thing that I got really, this is getting back to antisocial aggression. I would say what's been happening for quite some time with the protests and everything is really a level of antisocial aggression, and people get sucked in. But I had like some of my more elderly clients, get in touch. I literally say, I'm going to go to the protest this weekend. What do you think? What should I do? Should I, for preparation, what should I do? I go, well, number one, don't go to the protest. Don't do it. You are, look what's been happening in some of these things. If this thing goes, say this was in New York, and the New York ones were just going, the violence was just all over the place during this time. And I get it. There's other ways to show your support, because especially if you're compromised, if you have, a bad knee, or your wife is not as healthy as you are, or something like that, the risk just isn't there. But people they let their emotions get so taken away with this, that they would just go do things and take risks that were, unthinkable, when they could, because they don't want to believe it's going to get as bad as it is. I think the shock factor for people that are used to violence or being violent, and I've been in so many other countries where, riots and everything are that much, more the norm. When you see the cauldron that our country's had for the last year and a half, basically, there's that perfect storm. You've got the political tensions, you had COVID, and then you had the George Floyd situation just erupted everything. And it was people cooped up. And so it's worse than we've ever seen it in our country.
Yeah,
at this
I
point.
definitely agree with that it was a perfect storm of why there was that reaction.
And that's where you saw this increase in violence, and then the strange responses that we would get from some of the law enforcement community, some of the leaders, political leaders that were allowing things to go far beyond, a protest at that point. So it was strange, people literally calling 911, being told, sorry, we can't send anybody. I mean, so it's scary stuff,
Yeah.
But I think what it is, people, I would never tell people you have every right to go out and protest. You have every right to give your opinion. You have every right to share your outrage. The problem is you have the right to do that, but you don't necessarily know what the response is going to be, and that's just it. We're in a stage right now where I'm not advocating don't have an opinion or don't have, strong morals. Be very careful, though, the situations that you put yourself in, to vent those, because the emotional triggers on people right now are just ridiculous. I mean, think what it would take. What would it take to somebody to literally walk up to an innocent elderly person and just hit them? And just strike them outright. And these are young people doing this.
Yeah, it's very frustrating.
And it's just crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously avoidance of scenarios that you don't have to put yourself in is always ideal. But like the scenario that, like, the questions I were getting, for example, for the webinars is like, what if I'm just in the grocery store shopping and then someone like snidely says something to you, and I'm like, just try to leave or go talk to an associate or go, but I'm like, maybe you have better tactics than I would, and like that person that kind of maybe wants to keep following you around and just like heckling, and maybe it's not violent initially, but like you said, it just takes like a little wrong look or one yell back or something. Like, are there like little tidbit things, like little pieces of advice that you have other than like leave the scenario? Because I mean, that was in a nutshell. I mean, it was a little more extensive, but
leaving the scenario is there. There's also pattern interrupts you can do on people, where you introduce yourself. You go, hey, somebody's, throwing slurs at you or something. Go, hey man, I'm Tim. Because then all of a sudden you're humanized. Like I said, groups hate and individuals can show compassion. And when you do pattern interrupts at times, it's amazing to see some of the response sometimes. And the person all of a sudden, like, the glaze goes away and they recognize, oh, this is a person I'm talking to, because they're seeing you as part of a group, or they're seeing you as just an easy target or something. And they're dehumanizing you, when they're doing that. So there's that aspect of it. It's dicey, though. I mean, when you get into all this stuff, this is why having the last resort of knowing how to use a tool of violence is extremely important, because you may only have that one chance. And the good thing about the advantage that a weaker person or smaller person or an older person has is usually these people will give you an opportunity they wouldn't give somebody else, meaning they don't fear you because they don't think that you can do anything. And therefore, they'll probably bring something very vulnerable close to you. Mm-hmm. And if you know how to take advantage of that, because that might be your one thing. I've had many elderly clients who've had situations where they were able to get that one shot and changed everything.
Yeah.
For them, they knew how to go after a part of the human body that shut the other person down, gave them enough time to either get away or they could finish up to the person till the person's non-functional. And had we put those two people in a ring and everybody said go, we know how it would have happened. Normally the younger, bigger, stronger person in that scenario would absolutely take out the other person. But in a scenario where we're talking about the world of violence, that is where some unlikely people are able to not only protect themselves, but, come out, unscathed at times, because they know how to use, that tool. And it's your fail safe. It's your last, violence really is your own personal nuclear weapon, and you should treat it as such. Meaning, when you're devoid of choice is when you go to use that. And I would say in situations you're describing, you have to be very careful, because you're a hair's breadth away from it being that. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, if you think, especially if you are in that position, it's much better for you to strike first on a situation like that. And now legally, you're going to run into some issues if it's there. But for most people, especially if it's a younger, stronger, faster person, and you're there and they can say, hey, listen, this person was harassing, doing this. You're in fear for your life at that point.
Yeah.
And you can do it.
Yeah.
It's not a good scenario though. Like I don't want anybody to think like, no. This is some magic talisman where I'm going to show you 3 or 4 points in the human body and everything's going to be okay.
Right. And that's the problem, is always trying to get people to understand that. And that's why I really enjoyed your book and your methodology, because it's breaking the preconceived notion of what one thinks you're learning, quote unquote, when you're doing like a self-defense program, right? Like it's not that. And it's why I'm so fascinated by it. And one of the things I loved is your, talking about going slow for precision. So people were imagining like your seminars is going to be this like boot camp, super Navy SEAL type training or crazy, and I love when you talked about how just the reiteration of, if you are ever going to like learn anything, like doing it slowly and that targeting. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that, because I feel like you're able to break down a lot of those preconceived notions. Like one, what violence is, like that's like check. I think we covered a lot of that today, but like, I think it's important that as people move forward into researching what they should be learning, how they should be thinking about it. One is obviously get Tim's books, and if you can, go see him in Las Vegas. And Mark's always like, we need to go to Vegas and go and hang out with Tim. I'm like, it's not close by, but that would be great. But obviously that's a great way. But I mean, like maybe you could talk about that going slow for precision and like kind of your methodology. Well,
it's not, there's a great layman's book out. It was written, I think, 2007. It's called The Talent Code. Daniel Cohen wrote it, and Coyle wrote it. And great. I mean, just a great, talking. He looked at 7 different disciplines, from tennis to soccer to piano playing and music training. And he found at the highest levels, all these institutions were producing people at the highest levels, world champions and stuff. And they all employed some version of the same, they call it deep practice. It's like the term right now, but really it's just slow methodical training. And it was interesting. When I went through military training, I went through the SEAL teams before I was injured. When you're going through like basic underwater demolition school, what's really interesting is the first part of it is the part everybody sees, where the guys are carrying the logs and they're just being tortured and everything's fast, hard, running and yelling. What's really interesting is when you go to the weapons and explosives phase, there's still that during the physical evolutions where there are no weapons or explosives around you. They're working you out. But as soon as you bring in anything lethal, anything come in, the instructors went from being these psychotic maniacs to calm, clear. Everything was, by the book, and speed was the last thing that was introduced. Meaning, at the very end of training, they literally take 3 different weapons. They put them into a box, they shake it up, they pour it down, and then you have a timed evolution of putting everything together, on that. Mm-hmm. But what they don't tell you is that's predicated by, days and weeks of slowly taking that weapon apart, putting everything together, getting down, and you work up to level. You earn your way to speed. And for some reason, when it comes to combatives or hand-to-hand combat or martial arts, we throw that out the window. We go for speed right away. We front load speed. And what's interesting is some of the better performers in combat sports, that was their secret weapon, was the slow, deliberate training to get everything right. So when I'm talking about these areas, you want to absolutely know if you're going to go for the throat, you want to make damn sure you're hitting the throat and you're not hitting the top of the sternum. and this whole idea of, fast and static and throwing stuff out there, it's causing chaos in the brain. Your brain's saying to yourself in an extreme circumstance, what do you want me to do? If you say, hey, capitulate, there's nothing you can do. Great. Brain says, great. Well, I know how to do that. I'll do that. If during our training, we sit there and we start identifying areas of the human body, and we practice taking 1 square inch of us, putting on that vulnerable 1 square inch of them with our body weight behind it, slowly and methodically at first, and getting used to that, everything's being registered by the brain at that point, and it's being registered accurately because you're going slow enough to see if you're off balance. You're going slow enough to see if you're actually striking the target where you're supposed to. And you're going slow enough that your partner can accurately model injury for you, so you know what success looks like, and they trust you because you're not going too fast where you could actually injure them. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of this really great way of learning. It's a cooperative rather than competitive effort, where you get to learn, somebody allows you to use their human body to go in the most vulnerable areas, and they trust you enough to where they'll let you actually get really good training out of it. And what's funny is people will only see, like, say, the first hour of me training somebody. All they do is slow training. It's very funny because I'll look at, like, I remember this one guy was giving me a hard time, and I looked at him teaching a beginner in his BJJ class. And he was going even slower than me on day one, on some of the stuff, slow technique, very basic, making sure the guy got there. I go, well, you do the same thing. You just, you think because you get into competition right away after 6 months of the person going, that it's there. Their idea is somehow they think slow equals weak. And it's nothing. Firearms, that's all it was. And the mantra on firearms is, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Fast is deadly, and that whole idea is that you want to be accurate and correct first. You want to front load with accuracy and correctness, and then you can add velocity after that. It's not that velocity doesn't have its place, but velocity without accuracy and correctness is just going to, that one shot that I told you about that you might have, you've now lost it. Now they know that you're going to fight back. Now they know you tried to injure them, but you bounced it off the top of the pec and you didn't get that reaction because you're trying for the throat. Mm-hmm. And now that was your one opportunity, and you weren't able to exploit it because your training protocols didn't really stress accuracy and correctness first.
Yeah. And of course, with asocial violence, when you are fighting for your life, you really have that moment of opportunity. It's a pretty small window, I would say, right. From all the stuff that you've explained. And you have such an extensive list of credentials, and I will say that in the pre-roll, so everyone would have already heard all of the things you've done, from your military background to self-defense and martial arts. What area or what do you find most useful when developing this program? Because I know it took a lot of collaborative from everything that and then experience and everything. So when you went to go develop the target focused training and write all the books and everything, what would you say was like kind of the most important or useful thing for you to like really piece it all together?
I would say probably any instructor that's out there too listening. We are not the norm. Mimi, you and I are not the norm when it comes to martial arts and combat sports or anything. Why we take it to that crazy level. We liked it so much that we wanted to instruct and share the information, and we immerse ourselves in that. I think the biggest revelation for me was the vast majority of people don't want to learn self-defense. They don't want to learn self-protection. Mm-hmm. What they do want to learn is, how can I live a life that minimizes the chance that I'll ever need self-protection? And once I understood that's really what my clients are coming to me for. It's like, yes, some of them will train and they'll go on and they'll like it and they'll find it. But the vast majority of them are saying, hey, how can I live a life that will minimize the chance that I would ever need to use this information that you're about to give me? And that's where the behavioral changes start. And that's why I stress so much on the antisocial, and because that's the real message to people. That's where I can make the biggest impact on society, because I can't train everybody, nor would everybody want to train with me. Violence is there's no payoff in learning violence, meaning it's just something, it's a necessary tool that if you need it, great. But you really don't want to ever have to use it, because it's not like winning a competition against a really highly trained opponent that you have and you guys have agreed upon rules, and it's fun and it's great. It's skill against skill. It's a very positive thing. And you can learn from that. Violence, there's nothing to learn. It's you use it for survival purposes only. It's horrific what you have to do to the human body to survive in a situation like that. So when we put this thing together, the one thing that was interesting was we needed objective injury. We needed to understand what is objective injury. And we found where can we find useful information on that? And one of the first things this was developed originally at Naval Special Warfare Development, not development, at the Naval Special Warfare Command. And they had assets to sports. They had a whole sports medicine division they just put in. And they were able to help us with sports injury. And so what we found was, if you study sports injury, it's really useful data to start with. And the reason being is those injuries are caused by humans colliding with humans or humans colliding with the planet. And those are forces you and I can replicate. Mm-hmm. And so once we started doing that, we noticed there's about 70 areas of the human body that continually show up in the data. Some of those 70 areas have two areas, meaning, if you have one clavicle, you have two clavicles, mm-hmm. but you only count the clavicle once, even though there's two opportunities. So approximately 120, 140 areas of the human body where you can get some sort of response, either a nerve strike, a bone, or an organ that you're looking at. And then there's different ways to put trauma into those. You don't need to know all of them, unless you want to be like a freak like me and you geek out on it. But having a knowledge base of about 10 of them is really, really useful. And there are people that have made criminal careers, only knowing one or two. So it's not something where you have to overload yourself or you have to become a specialist in any way, shape, or form. But basic knowledge of the vulnerabilities of the human body, where no matter how much somebody works out, their throat's not going to get any stronger. Their cartilage, mm-hmm. the eye is not going to get any stronger. To give obvious targets. The clavicle is one of the few bones on the human body that you and I can break with our bones. If you successfully break the clavicle, you've essentially taken away 25% of the available tools to the person, because the whole mm-hmm. shoulder group drops and it's going to be harder for them to breathe. And then oftentimes they'll take their hand and they'll immobilize their shoulder because they don't want the broken bone to be, circulating around. So mm-hmm. you've essentially taken away 50% of their tools
right.
when you do stuff like that. And that's how you understand, you kind of antiseptically go through the body that way. And that's how we are. We talk about it in a very matter of fact way, like I'll show people, what the goal is and how you shut down the human body and how you mm-hmm. starve the brain of blood. And ultimately that's what we're doing. We're really trying to switch off the central nervous system, because that's the real weapon everybody possesses. The tools don't operate if the brain isn't there. And so getting the brain to shut down in a violent encounter is your most, it's the goal that you need to have completely focused on. And the easiest way to get there is to have a really good understanding of basic anatomy and response to trauma in these areas. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we kind of did that. And it was great, because what's good about it is you see in the sports world, you'll see these objective injuries that come in that has nothing to do. And you have two highly committed athletes, normally not just in combat sports, but say in soccer or something, they're both going for the ball. One misses and takes out the other guy's ankle. This guy who was so focused on going after the ball, his whole world becomes that injury at that point, and that's where we stop. Like we always say, where injury ends the competition and it's the beginning of violence. For us, so we watch things that stop competition is really where we as practitioners need to pay attention. What just happened? Because that was really effective. We're not condoning, we're not feeling, we're not being sadists, but we're trying to get our brain to only associate with the successful use of the tool of violence. And one of the more controversial things that I have people do is when they watch acts of violence. Normally when we watch acts of violence, we try to see everything from the victim's perspective. How could the victim have done something different to avoid it? Whereas the more useful information is what worked. Yeah. We're not condoning the act, but what we're doing, our brain is looking to identify, that was effective. They did this, and this, and then, look, that's where the injuries happened. What did mm-hmm. they do? And that's how predators look at it. And that's what puts you on par with predators. I mean, I would challenge everybody that hears the podcast, take an uncomfortable test for 30 days. When you watch acts of violence, watch it from the perspective of what's effective and do that. It's going to be hard at first. And then after a while, you can be dispassionate and look at it without identifying. Oftentimes it's easier if you turn the sound off.
Right.
So his story. And this might sound really harsh to people, but you want to only condition yourself to see the successful use of the tool. You don't want to see yourself on the other end of it where things just don't work out for you.
Yeah.
So it's little things like this. Like I said, I take people in, I did in the book and obviously I do in training. I'm going to take you to some uncomfortable places because unfortunately that's where the best information is.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't make you a criminal. It doesn't make you one of them.
Right. And it doesn't make you want to be more violent. I think there's a misconception there that, if I study this, suddenly I'm going to want to go out and start barf. Like, that's the point of, that's why I've been trying to explain to people. I'm like, no, this is the point. Like, his book is so insightful because it actually does the reverse. Like, if you understand it so much, like you said, I'll never need this, hopefully.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I think there's that misconception. It will make you more violent.
Yeah. Right? And it's actually the opposite. It makes you more peaceful. Meaning, the people I know that are the most competent, I have a lot of friends in the special operations community that do things like that. When they're around, they're totally calm, great guys. They don't know it. I've got some female operatives that are just amazing. And same thing. They're great with my kids. They live life. They laugh. They have a great time because until they need the tool, they're going to have a great life. And what's funny is once you've taken care of, violence, when you don't know anything about violence and you fear violence, then that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Once you've faced that and you said, okay, I've looked into this. I know what this is. All of a sudden, that worry is gone. Not that you're cavalier or you think you're some sort of a super, a super ninja or anything like that. It's that you just recognize, hey, I understand violence. It's kind of like I equate it to having the fire extinguisher in your house. You know how to use the fire extinguisher. It's there, but you're not constantly worried about a fire in your house. Until there is a fire, you're not going to bring that fire extinguisher out. And that's really what the tool of violence is. It's those that don't understand it. It's going to be a big problem for them. Those that do understand it, understand the ramifications of it, and they're able to live a life that's far more peaceful because they've already taken into account, how to use that survival information.
Yeah. And, I know we have to wrap up soon, but I have one more really important question on one of the tactics that you were explaining in your book is from one of the principles of Jack Dempsey. And so if you don't mind, I want to know how I can use a 10-pound baby to take out a 200-pound person.
Yeah, that struck me. That was amazing when I saw that. I think I was 11 years old. I'm trying to see if I have the book here. I get down to the book. I'll just give you folks a visual of it here.
Yes, because I don't have it.
But yeah, when I saw this as an 11-year-old kid, here it is.
My husband's like, you have to ask him like how we can start throwing babies at people.
So I saw this, and it shows basically a trucker walking, and it shows a baby falling out on top of a 200-pound guy. And Dempsey, the book is Championships Fighting. His whole point was even 10 pounds of body weight used in an event can injure a much larger, person. And so the great thing, especially when I'm training women, I tell them all the time, hey, I only weigh 90 pounds. I go, okay, who wants 90 pounds thrown into this area of their human body?
Right.
Nobody does. And if you understand how to deploy body weight into everything that you do, which I think is one of the things, that's another thing that going speed and static striking is really so detrimental. Especially for smaller people. Smaller people need to deploy everything into it, and they need to really understand how to get their body weight, to drop body weight into each shot. And it's not that hard. It's actually very easy to be able to do. I mean, there's the famous, Bruce Lee, 2-inch punch or 3-inch punch that he does, and all he's doing is dropping body weight into it. If you watch how he does it, when he drops his whole body weight, it's that body weight going forward. We used to do it where we'd put our I put fingers on somebody, then I drop and I'd punch them, and they just go flying because of body weight. And body weight is something that we all carry around. And the great thing about body weight is the universe doesn't care if it's fat or muscle. It's just body weight.
Right.
And so we tell people you want to make sure that your belt buckle passes through wherever you're striking. So if I come in and I'm stepping in to strike somebody, I want my belt buckle to go through there, and I should be standing where that person was. And that means that I've dropped my body weight. I mean, there's more to it.
Right. But obviously the force and
it's the one thing that we all have, I mean, physics. I have twin daughters that are 7, and, I'm already teaching them, little things. They don't know that's what I'm teaching them, but I'm already teaching them how to drop body weight and how to do things. And, they're surprised that their 10-year-old brother can sometimes fly off them when they use body weight. And
you're like, yes, good. Yeah, this is what I want.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's my evil way of getting them.
I'm pretty sure that, yes, I'm pretty sure they will be very prepared. But
it's important. And that's just it. We don't listen, we're all going to be different, in our approach. I mean, I never had the luxury of going up against somebody smaller, slower, and weaker than me. I've always had some mutant if I've had to deal with something. So we all kind of face the same situation. Somebody sees us as prey. Somebody sees us as a potential victim, and that person is going to be very aggressive with us. And therefore our response, we want, the one thing we know we will always carry with us is our body weight. And if we know how to use that, in addition to where to put the information, if I can drop my body weight and also, really just get right into that cartilage of the throat, then I'm going to get a huge result doing that. And that's probably the one we call it. I call it body weight is basically your real concealed carry. You have it. They can't take it from you.
Right.
And if you know how to deploy it, it's an extremely effective weapon.
Oh, 100%. In closing, I just want to say I also really enjoy a lot of your video posts and the information you're giving. So I want everyone to please go check that out and listen. But I really enjoyed, I think it was your daughter that drew a picture representing you and representing mom. And you said, look, it's the more fun parent. So I enjoy a lot of that.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah. Every so often, because I post a lot of stuff that's kind of harsh, obviously my videos, my interviews. It's good, and I like to show people, hey, I take what I do very seriously. I do not take myself seriously. My daughters do a very good job of keeping me grounded that way. It's very, very funny.
They tend to do that. Those little humans.
Yes. They have I'm wearing a Rocky Marciano shirt today, and they kept calling it Rocky Macaroni, and they thought it was so funny. And just, Daddy's wearing a macaroni shirt, and they knew they're just tweaking me because they know who he is. And I'm from Boston, and so one of the originals.
I'm from Boston.
my grandfather actually was good friends with Rocky Marciano's dad.
Oh, cool.
And so growing up, so the kids know that, but they just like to tweak me.
We all have to have something to continuously ground us. It's important and make us laugh. Like laughter Absolutely. Is so key, especially with such serious subject matter and things that we do need to hear. Though, like I know that a lot of what we discuss and can be uncomfortable, but on this podcast, this is exactly what I always tell my listeners. Like if it's uncomfortable, it probably needs to be discussed. And so, I mean, it's certainly something that I think is super important. And so I'm so thankful to you for sharing with me today, taking the time out of your very busy schedule to go through stuff that you talk about all the time that you've had to talk about over and over. And so I know that it can be, very tedious and, but I appreciate it. And again, I really enjoyed the book. I learned so much, and hopefully we will get to come out and meet you in person and do some actual training at your place out there. That would be really great. So thank you so much, Tim. I will link all of your stuff here so people can go out and buy your book and learn more about you and all of the really cool things you're doing with Target Focus Training. Everybody, Tim Larkin.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.